By the first week of July in 1944 here in Normandy, things were really advancing for the Allies who were fighting against the Germans who were defending this part of France. On June 6th, Hitler's Atlantic Wall had been breached. The Americans had moved in and moved up and taken the deep water port of Cherbourg, which had been destroyed. And after the fall of Cherbourg, well, their attention shifted to the east towards the town of St. Lo. And as the different divisions were making their way, well, they had to pass through this floodplain right here, just north of Le Hay-du-Puy. Right here is kind of the dividing line, this causeway between the 82nd Airborne Division, which would have been over here, and the 79th Division, which would have been off here to my left. So as the 82nd is making their way down this causeway and some of the other causeways off here in the floodplain, after 3 weeks of fighting, what they didn't know is that these causeways were leading to their final action right here in Normandy. Right now, I'm a map guy. Anytime I'm studying a battle or looking at any kind of action, I have to have a map to help me out. So to kind of set up what is going on at Le Hay-du-Puy, we've stopped at this little roadside park that has a map. Now here's what has happened so far. Here on the Cotentin Peninsula, you've had the 4th Infantry Division and the 79th and the 9th that have moved up. Cherbourg has fallen. And then the American Army is going to turn around and they're going to start shifting east here towards St. Lo. Okay, that's going to take them through Le Hay-du-Puy. Now at Le Hay-du-Puy, the thing that makes this such a monster is there are 5 hills that dominate this area. So if we look right here, here's Le Hay-du-Puy. Just for the sake of reference, here's Saint-Mère-Église up here. Kind of a well-known spot with the Airborne. So with Le Hay-du-Puy, you have 5 main hills. There's one hill right in the middle. There's one here. There's one here. There's one here at Montgarden, and then one over here at Montcastre. You have the 90th Infantry Division that is coming in from this direction. You have the 82nd that is coming in from this direction, and the 79th that is coming in from this direction. And the Germans have held up along this defensive line right through here and are waiting for the Americans. And then down below, kind of in reserve and just kind of hanging out down here, is the 2nd SS Das Reich. So we're going to spend a little bit of time going around some of these hills and looking at what these men were going up against in the first week of July of 1944. All right, we just made it up to one of the 5 hills around Le Hay-du-Puy. This is Mont Deauville. And even though the 79th and the 90th are involved in this, we're really going to be focusing on the 82nd Airborne because this is where they're going to really kind of hit the end of their rope. But behind me is where the 82nd is going to be advancing as they're making their way to Le Hay-du-Puy. Now off in the distance here, kind of above that tree line, you can see an open space. That is the causeway that we came up earlier. And the 82nd is going to be making their way south right through there. They cross the causeway. Now they don't run into any trouble there, but from up on top of these hills, well, there's German observation that can see them coming. This hill right here is Hill 131. So there was some German observation there. There's some German observation here. And as the 82nd moves, they're going to cross this hill. They're not going to run into any problems there, but where they are going to run into problems is over here in this area, which is where the German artillery was. And what we have is as the 82nd is moving through, you have German observation here, you have German observation from Deauville where I'm standing, and they're able to triangulate the position of the 82nd. And they have this nice little, I don't know, signboard thing here that really kind of helps us to orient ourselves. From right here, you can see the church tower at Saint Marie du Mont, and you can also see the Channel Islands. So this is a very commanding view that the Germans had from this point. I've moved back down into the valley, kind of around the approach where the 82nd was coming through. And you might be watching this video and thinking, dadgum, JD is smart. Boy, he really knows a lot of stuff. I wonder how he knows all that he does. Well, the answer is, I really don't know much at all. I just hang around with people like Paul from World War II TV. So anyway, he's been helping out, you know, kind of showing me different things that has to do with the fighting at La Haye-du-Puy.
So the 82nd, like the 79th, like the 90th, when they're approaching those 5 hills around La Haye-du-Puy, they have a road network. The problem with the road network is the Germans know you're coming down the road network. We talked about the observation they're under from artillery. Around the fields, the other option is crossing fields and going through farm tracks. Now what we're standing in here is a hedgerow. This is exactly what the 82nd and these other units had to face. What it is a boundary of a field. There's a road just over there and there's a field there. And on a map, this is just a little green line at the side of the road. What you find when you actually get here is you're talking about 10, 12 feet of undergrowth with a big ditch in the middle of it, full of water, with big trees and tree roots and overgrowth and brambles and everything they're growing up in there. And getting from there to there in short order is basically impossible. And this is the ordeal the Americans particularly faced in the hedgerow country in Normandy. There's lots of other country in Normandy, wheat fields near Caen, there's high ground, there's hills, but the bocage, the word for hedgerows is what we're describing here. And it takes sometimes just to stop and just walk into one of these things and see exactly what it is and realise how difficult it is. You know, we've been walking up and down here going, can we get in that bit? Because we don't want to rip up our clothing on the brambles and the thorns, things like that. And this is what these guys are facing, and the 82nd and 79th have been facing for a month before they get to the Battle of La Haye-du-Puy and the 5 Mountains. And this is where the casualties have come, because you don't need to have many Germans defending to be able to defend an area like this, because once they hear a bit of noise where a squad of Americans are trying to break out of one of these bits like where we're standing here, a German machine gun can move around and cover that approach where they come out. Mortars can open up on you because the Germans can hear the noise of the Americans moving, and the bocage countryside is understanding it is integral to understand the difficulties the 82nd and all these other units face there. And you can look on a map and say they've got to get from here to here, that's a distance of a mile. But in that mile, if you're not using the roads, you might have 30 of these obstacles to cross in that mile. In fact, the 29th Division approaching Omaha Beach, they worked it out that there were approximately 30 of these things every half a mile in their journey from the beach to Saint-Lô. So every half a mile, you've got one of these things to either work your way around, through, under or over. Over and under impossible, so it's around or through. So your shovel becomes your best friend, wire cutters, machetes, fighting knives, and eventually, of course, the Allies get good at dealing with this kind of terrain and problem. But it's something, as someone who lives in Normandy, when people say, "What are we going to see some bocage? Are we going to see some hedgerows?" You're going to see them as you drive past them, but you have to spend that time to actually walk in them and see what you're looking at. And if I had to get through to the road there by getting through here, I'm going to get myself ripped up and I'm going to make noise while I'm doing it. And while I'm doing that, the German who's over there is going to know where I'm coming from. And that, in a nutshell, is the problem of the hedgerows. And it means you're reduced in options as the attacker. I wouldn't quite say it's a defender's paradise, because in many ways the Germans hate it as well, because their command and control is difficult for them as well. But you could definitely say they have the upper hand in just predicting, the ability to predict where Allied soldiers are going to appear from, and it's all because of these hedgerows. So there you are, Bocage countryside, this is what it is.
Okay, now we've moved down to a place that we were looking at earlier from this hill right here. So that's Mont Deauville right there. And as I mentioned up there, this is Hill 131 ahead of us. So the 82nd Airborne, you got elements of the 505th, the 507th, the 325 glider infantry. They're coming over 131. And they are going to have their start line right along this tree line to assault the German positions right here on Hill 95. And this spot right here is going to be the high water mark for the 82nd Airborne in the Battle of Normandy.
So this is the foot of Hill 95. Which is where the 82nd Airborne came to face their last campaign in Normandy. They didn't know it when they started, but that's how it turned out to be. So they'd come off Hill 131 over there. Weren't any Germans down up there, but as they moved down to valleys, difficulty pushing through the hedgerows, navigation. And by this point, we're talking this attack being July the 4th. They've been here for a good 3 weeks, 4 weeks. They're suffering casualties. They've not got replacements in yet. 3rd Battalion 508, for example, had gone from 640 men to 225 before this attack. And particularly what they're short of is officers. There's 8 officers in that whole battalion, so that's everybody left. Everyone else has just been killed or wounded in the previous 3 weeks. Command is ragged. Colonel Mark Alexander, who'd been in various units, 505th, and who'd been taking over in the 508 for various points. He was wounded at the beginning of the O group for the commencement of this attack here, so he has to go back to be treated. Chet Graham, who was a friend of mine in the 3rd Battalion 508, takes on the command for the 508th. The 505th are involved, 325th are involved, and one of the problems that occurs is that basically coordinating things becomes very difficult. They set an hour, then one unit's not ready, they set a different hour, the other unit's not ready. They're doing this under almost continuous artillery fire for the Germans. We think in the region of 1,500 Germans are defending that hill up there at various points. And then it ends up being almost suicidal full frontal attacks on this hill there. And you can see yourself, it's a big push up there. You're working, you'd be puffing, your heart's working, you're under fire, pushing up a slope there. And then on the top of the hill, it's all heavily wooded. And within those woods, they didn't know it when they begin the attack, is an old Roman moat. Kind of a Roman, there's no water in it, but it's this sort of tunnel trench system. We're talking sort of 12 foot across, 20 foot deep. And the Germans have been using that to move from one position to another. There's machine guns, there's mortars. The Germans have artillery spotters behind La Haye de Puy, drawing in fire here. And it was just an absolute nightmare attack. One unit gets cut off there for a while. Another unit gets come in to kind of relieve them. There's friendly fire issues here. One of the guys who participated in this said that because it was July the 4th, he wrote about this years later, he said, I never see July the 4th the way other Americans see it. For me, it was a terrible day because I remember at the end of this battle, there being just truckloads of dead Americans from this battle here. And the numbers are staggering for what is effectively a very small hill. When they get there and they've kind of half taken the hill, the Germans then counterattack 3 times over 48 hours. And at the end of that 48 hours, they'd killed something like 500 Germans here and taken over 700 German prisoners. And there's a very dismissive comment written by one of the Americans who fought here. He says, yeah, and we captured the Germans and we killed them. There was no sort of sense of deliberation like there would have been on June the 6th about, is it right to kill Germans? By this point, everybody is just annoyed. Everybody is just exhausted of fighting their way through Normandy and dealing with what they've been dealing with every single day. And Hill 95 became the climactic battle of the 82nd Airborne. It's the last monument to the 82nd Airborne in Normandy. We don't find out what happens to them until Market Garden when they go there. And one of the famous photos of an 82nd Airborne trooper, the Life magazine photo of an 82nd guy kind of standing there with his helmet, and you can see the barrel of his rifle. Lieutenant Kelso Horn. And Horn was wounded in this battle in that field approaching the hill there. And decades later, when he died, he'd left instructions that his ashes were to be scattered here, because there's a guy who'd been through the whole campaigns with the 82nd Airborne, but he always thought that the day that was the most pivotal, the day that was the most dramatic for him, was the battle for Hill 95. So his ashes are here at this monument. And the thing is, we're travelling around looking at some of the airborne sites near the D-Day beaches. Everybody goes there because it's D-Day. It's Brecourt Manor, La Fiere Causeway. Here, an incredible battle. There's no one else here. There's never anybody else here because we're, half an hour, 40 minutes drive from the D-Day sites. But Hill 95, an amazing battle. It typifies the dogged determination of the 82nd Airborne, but also shows up how weakened they had become by a month of combat and how frazzled they are, how difficult everything was for them. Things that would have been a breeze 3 weeks earlier are just difficult because of a lack of numbers, weariness, if people are watching this wondering, why don't the air power just come in and sort those Germans out? There was just horrible inclement weather over this for like 10 days. The Allied air power cannot support in this area here because it's all cloud and fog up there. So unfortunately, it's boots on the ground. It's infantry, or in this case parachute infantry, just having to take these places out the hard way by pushing across fields under fire and getting up there and hoping for the best. And Hill 95 is an amazing battle. You should read about it.
Paul mentioned the issue of Life magazine that has this famous image of Kelso Horn on it, and the Gettysburg Museum of History actually has a copy of the magazine that we've brought with us today. There at the bottom you can see the publication date of August of 1944. And my guess is that most people who are watching this probably have never heard of La Haye du Puy or of the battle here at Hill 95. But for Kelso Horn, a man who jumped on D-Day and was at La Fiere Bridge and fought through the Battle of the Bulge and had all of these crazy experiences from battles that we're familiar with, where was it where he wanted to have his ashes laid to rest? Well, right here at Hill 95. So obviously this was a place that held deep meaning to him. Here at the base of Hill 95, as Paul mentioned, they have a memorial to the 82nd Airborne, and this is the last memorial that the 82nd Airborne will have here in Normandy. So you can go up here and you can see, they have this cast helmet here, and then there is a plaque that says, "To the valiant American soldiers of the 82nd Airborne for the capture of Hill 95, July 4th, 5th, and 6th, 1944. Here lies the remains of Lieutenant Kelso Horn." So beneath this plaque, there's a hole that's carved out of this rock, and that is where the ashes of Kelso Horn are today. Right here at the base of Hill 95. So when you hear about the fighting that took place with the 82nd Airborne, typically hear a lot with, La Fiere and some of the things that happened during D-Day around the beginning. But you don't typically hear about what happened to the 82nd at the end, where after 3 weeks they've just been ground down. and they're tired and they're battle weary, and still have to muster up the strength to take a very formidable position here like the one at Hill 95, which is why I'm glad that we can come to places like this and share them so that we can get the full story about the sacrifices and the heroism of these men. But this was the high water mark for the 82nd right here in Normandy.